Much like with what we've seen with Kiss over the last week or so, the drama with my favorite band of all time, Mötley Crüe, just never ends, and now it's reached incredible new heights as former guitar player Mick Mars has now sued the band over his percentage of profits and claiming that he was in fact forced out of the band. Over the recent months since it was announced that Mick would be retiring from touring, with former Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson guitar player John Five taking his place, both former Crue vocalist John Corabi and Carmine Appice, who is a close friend of Mick's, have both essentially called bullshit on the statement that was released announcing Mick's quote-unquote retirement and alluding to the fact that he was not very happy with how things were operating on the stadium tour last summer and that he was indeed pushed out of the band, so it wasn't as mutual of an agreement as the band would like you to believe. As for this new lawsuit, let's take a closer look. As we all know, it was announced last fall that Mick Mars would be retiring from touring with Mötley Crüe due to complications from his longtime battle with ankylosing spondylitis, but he was supposed to still be a member of the band and entitled to his quarter share of Motley's profits. While that was a huge bummer, it was very understandable, to me at least, and I do feel that John Five, who is an amazing guitar player, was a great fit within the band. That said, it was nowhere near that simple as they would have wanted you to think, as TMZ and Variety have obtained documents of Mick's lawsuit against the Crüe, which claim a number of things that don't exactly paint the band in a very great light. To start, Mick claims in the suit that while he did indeed tell them that he could no longer do full-blown tours, that part of the statement was true. He told them that he could still take part in pretty much every other aspect of the band, including recording new music, limited live performances, residencies, etc. Referring to Mick's condition, the lawsuit reads, "Over the years, this disease caused Mars's lower spine to seize up and freeze completely solid, causing scoliosis in his back and also compressing his spine downward so that he is now at least 3 inches shorter than he was in high school. His spine is now completely seized from pelvis to skull, a condition known as bamboo spine." Getting into the legal matters now, the lawsuit continues. How did Mars's brothers of 41 years respond to Mars's tragic announcement about quitting the road? They noticed an emergency shareholders meeting for the band's main corporate entity in order to throw Mars out of the band, to fire him as a director of the corporation, to fire him as an officer of the corporation, and to take away his shares of the corporation. When he did not go away quietly, they purported to fire him from 6 additional band corporations and LLCs. Mick goes on to claim that Nikki Sixx, who was essentially the leader of the band, had talked a lot of shit by insulting Mick, with Mick turning around and basically confirming Carmine Appice's recent remarks about the band playing the tracks, with the suit saying, quote, "During much of the band's recent tenure, Sixx continually gaslighted Mars by telling him that he had some sort of cognitive dysfunction and that his guitar playing was subpar, claiming that Mars forgot chords and sometimes started playing the wrong songs." Astonishingly, Sixx made these claims about Mars's playing while he did not play a single note on bass during the entire US tour. Ironically, 100% of Sixx's bass parts were nothing but recordings. Sixx was seen fist-pumping in the air with his strumming hand while the bass part was playing. In fact, a significant portion of Vince Neil's vocals were also pre-recorded. Even some of Tommy Lee's drum parts were recordings. Some fans actually noticed that Lee was walking toward his drum set as they heard his drum part begin. Mars, at times on the tour, did play the wrong chords, but not due to any cognitive dysfunction. He was playing live, and his in-ear monitors were constantly malfunctioning, causing Mars to be unable to hear his own instrument. The fact is that Mars is rarely mocked or criticized online. He is a quiet member of the group who shows up to play and puts his heart and soul into each performance. Conversely, other band members are often criticized online, particularly Neil, who is routinely torn to shreds for, among other things, not remembering the songs. Boy, that's putting it lightly. While it wouldn't be surprising if Nicky was in fact miming the entire time on the road, as those claims have been made about Nicky before, and he himself has even acknowledged the band's use and appreciation of tracks, but to claim that a quote-unquote significant portion of Vince's vocals were pre-recorded sounds completely absurd to me. I went to 2 shows on the stadium tour and the first ever show with John 5 a couple of months ago in Atlantic City. And look, there were definitely some vocal tracks, most notably in The Dirt and Saints of Los Angeles, if I recall. But holy shit, go look at my footage from some of those shows. Go look at the thousands of other videos of shows from the most recent tour. It is very clear, going back even over a decade, that Vince is not singing to a track a majority of the time. And to claim that Mick can't play, some of it, maybe it's a little bit sloppy. It's been that way for a while, but he's still playing, and some of the other members can't even hold a candle to Mick's live performances. As for Nicky, quote-unquote, gaslighting Mick, that's definitely very sad to hear. As I recall an episode of Nicky's ex-girlfriend Kat Von D's show, I think it was LA Inc., where Nicky gets a portrait of Mick tattooed on his thigh or leg or something, and he reveals it to Mick backstage at Crüe Fest. I always thought that that was a rather touching moment, but apparently the respect and admiration seems to have worn off. Both Mick and Nicky were childhood heroes of mine for very different reasons, but nobody seems to have a positive thing to say about Nicky. I mean, just go listen to Sully Erna's interview on Jamie Josta from Hatebreed's podcast, The Josta Show, about Godsmack's treatment on Crüe Fest 2. Yikes. According to the lawsuit, shortly before the original announcement of retiring was made, Mick and his attorney were sent a separation and release agreement, which, according to Mick, falsely claimed that he, quote, no longer desires to furnish his services and perform in the band and no longer desires to be an officer or director of the Motley Crüe entities, and then concluding that Mars hereby resigns as an officer and director of the Motley Crüe entities. If he were to sign that agreement, his cut of profits from touring would drop to 5% from what was supposed to be 25%, and then to 0% from future touring, which I believe the 5% that he's supposed to get, according to them, is for this current world tour that they're on that's going to run throughout 2023. The same exact deal structure would also apply to merch sales, except for any merch that portrays John 5. From that, he would get nothing. Per Variety, a footnote on the lawsuit reads, countless members have left countless bands, typically after much less than 41 years, or died and still maintained, or their estates maintained, their shareholder, officer, and director status, as well as their concomitant right to profits. Now, according to Mick's attorney Ed McPherson, he was warned by Motley's attorneys that, quote, if your client rejects the severance package that was graciously offered to him by the band, he will get next to nothing. I suggest you think about the repercussions of this decision. There is undisputed legal cause here for Mick's removal. Mick is unable to perform as a full-fledged band member. Among other things, as demonstrated during the last tour, he repeatedly forgets his chords, does not play the right song, plays chords of a different song while on stage, and so on. Mick's attorney responded to that warning by saying, your attempt to squeeze some alleged performance issues into the phrase, conduct constituting legal cause for such termination, is absurd. More importantly, however, for the band to think long and hard about is that asserting this as a basis for termination also opens the door for a lot of public scrutiny into the quality of the performances by the other members of the band, which is absolutely true. Supposedly, late last year, right around the time of the retirement announcement, a counteroffer was made with Motley's attorneys offering a 2.5% increase to 7.5%, but still divesting Mick of all other Motley-related interests once it dropped to 0%. Mick, of course, refused to agree to that, and understandably so, which caused the band to go to arbitration, quote, rather than a public lawsuit so that the public would not be aware of the deplorable manner in which they treated their quote-unquote brother of 41 years. I do also want to point out that the lawsuit really appears to just be an effort to go through Motley's books and financial records, and it does not name Vince Neil, Tommy Lee, or Nikki Sixx individually, but rather the businesses of Mötley Crüe Touring Inc., Mötley Crüe Inc., Red, White, and Crue Inc., Masters 2000 Inc., Crüefest LLC, Motley Records LLC, and Masters 2008 LLC. This is just incredibly disheartening for me as a longtime diehard Motley fan. We've talked about a tremendous amount of Motley-related things on this show since the retirement announcement was made, and I got to admit, when we talked about the John Corabi thing about where he thought that the band was forcing Mick out, I did not really fully believe his speculation, and while only those involved know, and this is of course the very beginning of what I'm sure will be a very long battle, a majority of this lawsuit feels very, very plausible, and I do think Corabi will turn out to be 100% correct. One final thing I want to say before we wrap this up is that to a certain degree, I can sort of see Motley's point of Mick no longer being a quote-unquote full-fledged member since he was no longer going to tour, but it's complete bullshit that Motley's team is using Mick's abilities, or according to them, quote-unquote lack of abilities, against him. If we were going to use someone's performance against them, perhaps John Corabi should return to the fold as vocalist. I love Mötley Crüe so much. The band is a huge part of my life, but this is just beyond disappointing, not necessarily surprising, but extremely disappointing that this has turned into this fucking circus that it's become. All right, though, I gotta run. My fiance is waiting for me to her in the... So I gotta go. But thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.